So welcome to the session on wall-to-wall graphics. What we're going to be going through today is an introduction, which we've just briefly gone through. We'll be looking at some methods and technologies. So we'll be looking at cut vinyl, print and cut, using eco solvent and UV for creating wall graphics, and a product called the EJ Deco, which is a product specifically for creating, well, not just for creating wall graphics, but mainly for interior decor solutions. So we'll be taking a look at that as well. We've got some examples of each of those as well whilst we go through those. Next up, we'll be taking a look at graphics, so formats, sizing, and sourcing of your graphics. We'll be looking at surfaces, locations for your wall graphics, and the range of media that there are available for you to create those graphics. And finally, we'll be talking through a little bit about application, things to look out for, how to, and some of the tools and things that are available. And then we'll finish at the end of those. Methods and technologies for starters. First of all, we'll talk through cut vinyl. So there are a range of different ways that you can create wall graphics. There's loads of different solutions out there. The first of which we're going to be looking through is cut vinyl. So this is sort of, I guess, the most basic way of creating wall graphics, and you can use any vinyl cutter that's out there on the market. In terms of Roland technology, we start with a smaller cutter that we have called the sticker range, and there's a couple of different sizes available. Then we move up to the GS24, which is the 24-inch vinyl cutter. And then we have our larger or wide format cutters as well in the GR range. They come in a 54-inch and a 64-inch version as well. So depending on the type of graphics that you're going to be creating or your budget, you can look at different solutions for your needs. So vinyl cutters are, in essence, just a cutting machine. You put in a material, you cut out your design, and then you can apply that afterwards. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of different vinyls that you can use to create your cut vinyl graphics. They come in all sorts of different finishes. So most of them will be self-adhesive films. So they'll have an adhesive on the back, which means that they can stick onto walls. We also have different effects, so like glitters, metallics, glow in the dark, chromes, sparkly ones, whatever. There's so many different varieties out there, and as long as you can find the correct width for your machine, so for example with the GS24, a 24-inch or smaller vinyl you can put into the machine, and then you can cut out your designs. Obviously with the larger machines you can cut larger vinyls as well. And with this technology, you will also need something to run the machine. So depending on your device, with the Roland devices, we have something called Roland Cut Studio, which is basically a sort of plugin that can send data to your machine, which can come with all of our devices. It has some limited design functionality in it as well, but normally you would use a separate design program to create your graphics and then import those into Roland Cut Studio. You can also use most of our cutters in VersaWorks, which is our RIP software, which we use for a lot of our print devices. So if you had a printer and a separate cutter, you can put that into VersaWorks and you can take jobs from one into the other. And finally, with the larger devices, so with the GR range, we have a new software where we've teamed up with Flexi. So you can get Flexi signed for the GR edition, which is for a year with your purchase, which means it's a more comprehensive cutting software that can come with your GR as well. For those of you that are interested to find out more about cut vinyl, we do have a cutting guide which you can access. So the link is on the screen there. It's rolanddg.co.uk/site/get-into-cutting-guide. So there's a full guide that you can download, which will give you a full overview of everything to do with vinyl cutting. But as we said, it's a pretty easy to get into technology, as there aren't many consumables. So once you've purchased your kit, the consumables will be the materials that you will use, and some blades and something called a cutting strip, which is the strip that runs below where your blade would run. But obviously you don't have the expense of having inks or anything like that within your device. So it's a pretty low investment to be able to get into cutting vinyl for wall graphics. You will also need some tools probably if you're going to be doing application yourself, maybe an area where you can prepare the cut vinyl and things after you've cut it. So you might want application tape, tools like a weeding tool or a squeegee, and maybe a sort of preparation bench where you can lay out the graphics to get those ready to be put up onto a wall. And that's pretty much it for vinyl cutting. What I've done next is I'm going to show you an application showing you the processes involved and how this would work. You can also, as I mentioned about the cut vinyls, you can choose a specific film for a whole design. You can also use vinyl cutters to layer designs. So if you do have multiple colors within your design, you can split the colors into separate cut paths, and then you can cut into the different colors and you can layer those up onto the wall to create different effects. There are, as I said, so many different vinyls out there for walls, ranging from just sort of standard self-adhesive vinyls to specific wall medias, which we'll cover a little bit later as well. So this is a video of the GS24. So what I did was created a design which is kind of a half of a mandala for a wall graphic. And as you can see, you'll put your vinyl into the machine. As I said, you can go up to 24 inches. You can go smaller as well because you can move the pinch wheels. And the machine will go across and cut out your design. We used Cut Studio for this design, so we created a vector design in another program. So I used Illustrator to create this vector design and then imported the vector graphic into Cut Studio. It's really simple to use. You pretty much import your graphic, orientate it or lay it or scale it to the correct scale, and then the machine will cut it out. The machine has different cut pressures and things, so you can do tests to check that you're going to be able to cut through your vinyl, but that's pretty much it. Once it's cut out your design, you can cut off the material and then we can get that ready to be applied to a wall. So this was just using a gloss black vinyl, which was just a standard black vinyl, which can be applied to most flat surfaces. So once you've cut your design, the next stage with cut graphics is normally to weed it. So weeding is taking away the excess vinyl that you don't want to apply to your wall. So here you can see I'm using a weeding tool just to take away that excess material. This is where your cut pressures come into play. If your cut pressures were not correct, it will be difficult to do this stage of your application process. If you haven't cut through enough, then lots more of the vinyl will come off, and if you've cut too much, the backing sheet will start to come off as well. So this is quite an intricate design, as you can see, so there was quite a lot of weeding involved. You can create designs where things will weed in larger pieces, so you don't have to go through this often tedious phase of weeding all of the graphics. But as you can see here, once you've weeded your entire graphics, you then need to transfer this onto the wall. And the way that you would do that is using something called application tape. Here you can see we've got one that looks similar to masking tape. You can see that I didn't have a piece wide enough for the whole graphic. So what I've done is applied two sections to cover the whole graphic with an overlap of the application tape. So you just use a squeegee to rub this on, making sure that you get it nice and flat. And then your graphic will be ready to be transferred. So that application tape holds your whole design together whilst you go to put that onto a wall. When it came to applying this graphic, just chose a section of wall and used some masking tape to hold it in place, and then just a little bit more prep there, getting it nice and neat on the edge of the wall. And then I've created a hinge across the graphic using the masking tape. This means that I could peel back the backing sheet with the vinyl nice and close to the wall, checking that all of the vinyl stays on the application tape, and I can create or lay down the top section first. Again, just using a squeegee, rubbing nice and firmly onto the wall, and then take off the hinge and then do the bottom section as well. For smaller graphics, you might not need to do the hinge method, but for larger graphics, it can make it much easier. And normally, obviously with larger graphics, everything's easier with two people, but was doing all of this on my own. So as you can see, it was fairly easy. I'm using the hard edge of the squeegee as well to give the vinyl a real firm rub down. And then whilst pulling off the application tape, just making sure that I stay nice and close to the wall and check that all of the graphics stayed on the wall as well. This is just that bit of wall there, I think, is either plasterboard or it might have been just some wood, I think, some sort of painted wood finish. And obviously you do need to check that you're going to prep the wall first. So normally this would involve a lot of cleaning of the wall. just to check that it's all nice and clean and that your vinyl is going to stick properly. Cleaning is a very important part of doing your wall graphics. This was a painted wall that was painted a long time ago, so there were no issues with the waiting for the paint to cure or outgas properly. And as you can see, we've just got our black vinyl stuck onto the wall. This was just a single color graphic, but you can, as I said earlier, layer your colors to create different graphics. So this is the most simple form of creating a wall graphic by using cut vinyl. There's lots of different applications for using cut vinyl for wall graphics. A very common application would probably be in a sort of office environment for creating branding messages or text, as you can see in that example, onto walls. And you can see there that a couple of different colors have been used as well. This just gets a little bit trickier with your alignment because you need to make sure that you're laying the colors in the correct position. So it can be useful to put alignment points onto your cut graphics. So you could put little circles, for example, in the corners of your graphics and make sure that these align across the other colors as well. Another common application would be in sort of the home environment, so maybe children's bedrooms, that kind of thing. And again, you can cut any design, just instead of creating painting masks, you can stick vinyl on, and you can get removable vinyls so that these can be changed down the line as well. Another one from the home environment there, a family tree. These kind of graphics are very popular at the moment and would be sold all across, you know, Etsy, eBay, those kind of things, and are very easy to create. You can have a range of default or sort of stock libraries of graphics that you would cut, and people can just choose from these, or people can send you across their own graphics. With vinyl cutting, the graphics do need to be in a vector format. So we'll come to graphics in a little while and talk about that. But with vinyl cutting, the cutter blade needs to follow a path. So you would use a vector graphic for the vinyl blade to follow. So with that tree, for example, this would be a set of curves that would be created, and then the vinyl cutter will just follow those paths accordingly. If you use bitmap graphics, these are pixel-based graphics, photographs and things, the cutter does not have a path to follow, or you may get very jagged edges if you try to use a vector from a pixel-based image. Interior decor could be a really interesting solution as well. If you can't find the wallpaper or the tiles that you like, then obviously a vinyl cutter can create those as well. And as you can see on the left, you can create really intricate designs. So you can create just about anything with a vinyl cutter as long as you've got the patience, as you can see on the left there, for the weeding phase as well. And again, just another slightly more bold graphic there for an office interior, just showing a skyline. So mixing different colors, you could have a solid color wall and put different colors on top, or you can create really intricate designs as well. Next, we'll move on to print and cut. So in terms of the Roland technology, again, I've put the products on screen that would probably be suitable there. So ranging from our smaller print and cut products, such as the BN20, then we've got the SG2 series, VG2 series, the XR640, and we've also got a UV print and cut device called the LEC2. All of these machines can print and cut graphics. So you'll put in normally a white vinyl, but they can print onto some colored vinyls, reflectives, silvers, you know, so there are a whole range, or chromes, of other vinyls that you can print onto. Again, we'll come to those a little bit later. But normally you would print onto those films, and then there would be a contour cut that would go around the outside. So the benefit being that you don't just have single color graphics like you would with a cut vinyl, and you can create just about any design because you can print photographs, vectors, mixture of the two, just about anything, and you can cut out certain elements to put those onto different surfaces. Eco-solvent devices will normally print onto coated medias, so you have to use a printable film. All of these devices can just cut as well. So if you were looking at printing and cutting and just cutting, you can just use these as a cutter if you do not have a separate cutter. With the UV device, some of the benefits of using a UV device would be that you can print onto other materials as well that aren't coated. So you can print onto just about any material that you can get that's on a roll that will fit into your machine, because UV does not need to absorb into the material. So it prints onto the surface and is cured by UV light. Some of the other advantages would be that you have a gloss ink in a UV device, so you could add texture and embossed effects using the UV ink. So just something that could help make you stand out from what other people can do would be adding textures and details and things using the gloss ink into your design rather than using a matte vinyl and then a gloss vinyl on top, for example. Some of these devices can also come with white ink, so you can print onto clear films, so there would be less cutting involved. And you can create white gradients and things like that as well. So if you wanted to create perhaps a snowy scene on a clear vinyl using white ink, you could print that and stick that onto a black wall to give you quite an interesting effect. Again, in terms of the stuff that you need to create this, you'll need a RIP to run your machine. So this is a program that sort of sends data and has some other additional capabilities within it. And for most of the Roland devices, that would be VersaWorks. In terms of the materials, as we said, that mostly turn self-adhesive films when you're cutting, and they need to have a backing sheet on if you're going to be printing and cutting, because you're going to be cutting through one layer and you need something on the back to hold that together. So most self-adhesive films will have a backing sheet on as well. Again, we'll come to materials a little bit later and talk through some of the different types, but in essence, normally they would be white because you're printing color onto it, but you can get a whole range of other materials as well. And again, in terms of tools, application tape to transfer graphics that have got lots of intricate cuts or separate elements, you need those to be held together in the original layout that they were print and cut in, so you would use application tape to do that. Application tape comes in different strengths depending on the material that you're printing on as well. And as you can see in that image there, that's again the sort of application tape that looks a lot like masking tape, but you can get clear application tapes as well, which can be useful when you're aligning graphics to existing elements on a wall. And then a whole range of different squeegees and weeding tools to help make those processes a little bit quicker. If you do a lot of print and cut work, you can also get sort of weeding machines. It's basically just a sort of roller that will help you wind off the material, but they don't automatically weed for you, unfortunately. Again, in terms of help, if you are interested in print and cut graphics for wall graphics, we do have a print and cut guide which you can download, which gives you a whole overview of the technologies and the processes involved. And again, the link to download that is on the screen at the moment. So rolanddg.co.uk/sites/print-and-cut-guide. So again, what I've done is I've print and cut an application to show you some of the processes. This one's using the VG2, and we were printing a graphic that looks like a hole in the wall, quite a common sort of theory or application that people like is sort of playing on the idea that you've got, you know, a hole in the wall or something bursting out of the wall. So as you can see here, it's got some sky sat behind some brickwork which has been printed, and then the printer will print that out, wind it back, and then cut it out. In this example, we used a really easy to apply spot adhesive material. This one was from Dry Tack, and instead of having a flat layer of adhesive on the back, it's got dots of adhesive. This means that there's air channels, which can be really easy for you to then push the air out whilst applying it. What I was doing here, if I just go back a second, what I was doing in that part that you just saw, sorry, I've skipped the video ahead there. Let's jump back, is I just put some masking tape tabs into the corners whilst I was aligning the graphic onto the wall. In this example, as it's one complete print, I didn't actually use application tape. What we did instead was put that onto the wall and put masking tape to align it. And if we just carry on playing the video here, you see I can cut off those masking tape tabs so that we can realign when we put the graphic back up. And then took the print away and just revealed the top sort of 6 inches or so of the material, and then realigned the masking tape tabs. So you can see the bit that's hanging down, that's the adhesive side, so that we could stick the top down and then work our way down the material. Again, there's lots of different methods for how you apply. In this method, we just use the squeegee to stick down the top section and then roll up the material so that we can access the backing sheet, and then slowly reveal parts of it as we use our squeegee on the way down. As I mentioned, this was a spot adhesive, so it's really easy to apply. No air bubbles, nice and easy. And you could even use this to send out to customers so that they could apply themselves, because it really is that easy. Then just give it a good rub down to check that it's all on the wall, and there we go. This is another example. This is actually the same graphic, but this was applied onto an outdoor wall. So as you can see, same process, weeding away the background, but this time using a heat gun and a stiff brush to get into the brick on an outdoor wall. So using that method, you can use different tools to be able to get into the different contours of the brick. However, you need to use a film that's suitable for exterior use and for going into those different contours. So there are a whole different range of those that you can get. And you would normally use a heat gun and some kind of a roller or a brush to get into all those deep recesses and things of the brick. They use a much stronger adhesive to be able to adhere to the different bits of brick. And obviously you would want to give the wall a good clean and rub down to get rid of any small bits of debris or anything like that before you start applying as well. So again, some different applications, just some bits that I found online that I thought were quite interesting. This example here uses some of its surroundings. So that's actually a security camera, which they've sort of played with the idea of this lizard's eye being the security camera, and that could be print and cut and applied onto a wall. Just nice to sometimes not just have such standard graphics, but try and make them interact with their surroundings, make them a little bit more interesting. This graphic is actually at the Roland DG UK headquarters in Clevedon, where we used lots of different elements to create a really interesting graphic. So we used print and cut to create a backlit wall graphic. We used some gold vinyl to create the frame that you can see there, and then a whole different range of technologies to spell out different words and things. So again, you can layer up your designs or mix them with other technologies to create some really interesting effects. Again, the home market, bedroom walls, living room walls, that kind of thing. You can create graphics using removable films, which will be repositionable as well. So if somebody does rent an apartment or looking to have a graphic that they can move around, you can do that as well with your materials. So as I mentioned, exterior films that can go onto brickwork, and office graphics and things for branding and boardrooms and that kind of thing would be another common application for print and cut. Next, we've moved on to print only. So if you are going to be doing a lot of wall graphics, you don't necessarily need a print and cut machine unless you're going to be cutting as well. As I mentioned at the start, you can pair a cutter with a printer as well. So you can have two separate devices if you do want to separate the processes. And in terms of print only and the Roland lineup, the current setup, we've got eco-solvent devices such as the RF640, or there's an 8-color version of that as well. We have the EJ Deco, the EJ640. We'll come to the EJ Deco in a minute, which is a high-speed printer for print only. We've got a new device called the VF2, which has an additional ink set. So it does have orange and green inks as well as the normal CMYK and the light colors as well. So this really expands your gamut. So if you are going to be doing a lot of corporate work, so you're going to be doing wall graphics for office interiors and that kind of thing, often having the additional ink set will really help, because you'll be trying to hit specific Pantones and vibrant colors, and not all CMYK devices will be able to achieve those colors. So having a print-only device with the additional ink set will really make that possible, so that you can hit corporate colors and maintain the consistency across their branding. The print-only models, the advantage over a print and cut model is that they will be a quicker model for printing normally, because they don't have to have the cutting function within them as well, and they'll be a little bit they'll be a little bit cheaper than a print and cut device, because they don't have to have that additional technology as well. And finally, I've shown you there is one of our UV devices, one of our belt-fed UV devices, which can have print-only capabilities as well as printing onto rigid substrates and things like that. So again, you can have a UV print-only device. Again, some more applications for this kind of market might be things like splashbacks or kitchen backdrops for the interior sort of home market. Again, big office graphics. A nice application there of a bathroom using the bathroom mirror for I think that's John Lennon's glasses. Again, nice to use some of the surroundings as a bit more interactive, and another interior version of that brick application wall there. In this example, I'm going to show you the EJ Deco for printing larger graphics with tiles. So the EJ Deco is a fairly new device for us, and it's called the EJ Deco for it's a decor printing machine. So it's mainly based around wallpapers, canvas, textiles, those kind of things that are used for interior decor solutions. The Deco uses a water-based ink rather than a solvent-based ink. So it does have some additional benefits in terms of not having a solvent-based ink within the machine as well. You can print onto just sort of your bog standard wallpapers, blank wallpapers that you can buy from any DIY hardware store as well. So you don't have to have specific printable materials for the EJ Deco. So in this example, what we did was create a graphic in 2 drops. So this is a graphic printed onto, this material was actually a self-adhesive textile material. So it's a textile-based material with a removable adhesive on the back. As you can see, I forgot to put the take-up unit on, so just pulling the graphic out as we go. And this is 2 graphics, so 1 graphic split into 2 tiles with a 20mm overlap between the 2. And I'll show you in a little while how you would do that in VersaWorks. So this is 2 tiles that were 2.7 meters, I think they were, long each. The printer does not print edge to edge, so these need to be trimmed after you've printed them to get rid of the white surround. So we use a large cutting table to do that, just to trim down the edges once we've finished printing. You can tile your jobs to print full length walls as well. Obviously here we only printed 2 tiles, but you could print 20 tiles, 50 meters long, in order to be able to stick these up as well. So after they were printed, we just went and cut these down into the 2 tiles and started by, again, applying from the top in this example. It's again a really easy to apply material, just pulling off the backing sheet as we work our way down the material. In this example, we had 1 overlap, which was 20mm. So the overlap amount that you have, just going to pause there for a second, will depend on either the fitter or the type of material that you're using. So as a preference, whilst I was applying this one, I just wanted a 20mm overlap. The reason you have an overlap is that normally the materials that you will use can change over time. They can shift ever so slightly. And if you had a butt-up joint, they might pull apart slightly, leaving a thin gap between them. So if you overlap your graphics, that will not happen. Certain materials will not move. Things like our polyester films and some of these ones that are used for the aqueous device, so the EJ Deco, might not move. Therefore, you might not need an overlap. Or what you can do is print the overlap, and then you can run a knife down the overlap join and peel away the excess, giving you a perfect finish afterwards as well. So you don't have that little overlap between them. However, normally having an overlap would be the default process. So what I needed to do here was lay 1 tile and then again reveal the top section of the next tile to hold that one in place. And again, this would have been a lot easier with 2 people, so you can have somebody at the bottom half of the tile to align any elements of the graphic that you can. So you can see here the top part of the graphic is just a nice sky blend, so it was a little bit more tricky to align at the top there. So needed to align some of the elements of that pier a little bit lower down to check that everything's in the same position. This can be tricky when you are using vinyls because they can stretch whilst you're applying. This material was a textile base, so it didn't move, and it was repositionable, which meant that if I did go wrong, I could always peel off and start that part again. So again, as you can see, just checking there that I had the join lined up, and then started at the top by revealing a section and again working my way down. So again, was just using a normal squeegee with a soft edge on it to align these parts of the graphic. And then there's the tricky bit at the bottom where we had those power parts, power outlets, just to cut around those as they were going onto the wall. So here we've only used 2 tiles, but as you can tell, you can use infinite amounts of tiles for doing your wall graphics to print over full walls whilst doing your application. Here's another example. This is actually from, again, it just so happens that this is from TriTac, showing the same process, but using, I think it was 7 different drops to do a whole wall graphic, again, printed on the VG2. So there is a tool that you can get, which is a sort of slicer tool, which will help you reveal a middle section of the vinyl. That would be very useful in these examples. So rather than starting at the top and working your way down, you know, that way it can be tricky to check that you've got a correct alignment. You can start in the middle and go up, and start in the middle and go down. So it's a little tool that just reveals a section in the middle of your sheet by taking away a portion of the backing sheet to then apply that onto a wall. Again, some of the different applications or different materials and things that you can use with the EJ Deco, so wallpapers, murals, lampshades, wall decals, so you can pair the EJ Deco with a cutter, blinds, so we're not just talking wall graphics here, but ceilings, canvases, posters, are some of the different applications that product would be suited for. And again, I mentioned that it uses an aqueous ink, so it does have some really high level standards that it adheres to, so for use within certain environments where they might need these standards, such as, you know, maybe hospital settings or you know, children's bedrooms, that kind of thing, where you might want to use materials that do not have solvents in them effectively, as you would have with an eco-solvent device. Next up, we'll talk through graphics for printing wall graphics. Now, in essence, there's 2 basic graphic data formats. There's bitmap and vector. Bitmaps are made up of pixels, vectors are made up of data points within a digital space. So different softwares will design or create graphics using the different formats. So just as an example, if you use the Adobe suite, Photoshop is a bitmap-based software, Illustrator is a vector-based software. The printers can print either format. Cutters need to use vectors. And obviously, if you're using vectors, well, it's not obvious, but vectors can be infinitely scaled. So if we have a graphic that's, you know, 500 millimeters wide, you can print that 5 meters wide, and there's no loss in quality if you're using vector-based graphics. However, if you're using bitmap-based graphics, the larger you expand these, so if I had a graphic that was, you know, A3 size and I wanted to print it onto a large wall, the pixels within that image will just get bigger. So you need to have a higher resolution image to be able to expand it so that you don't see the pixels really large on your wall graphic. So normally we would use something called DPI or PPI, so dots per inch or pixels per inch, as the resolution mode for bitmap graphics. So that's if you're printing things like photographs onto large walls. As I said, if you're using vector graphics, it makes no difference. And if you're using a cutter, they have to be vector based as well, because the cut needs to follow a specific path. If you are creating bitmap graphics at a larger scale, there are some little sort of tricks and things you can use to help you not have strong pixelated edges. The best thing is to start with a higher resolution image in the first place. The higher the resolution, the more you expand it. You know, if the pixels are very small to start with, when you make it bigger, the pixels won't look so big. Whereas if you have large pixels, so the amount of pixels per inch, so if you look at that DPI graphic on the left-hand side, if we had a 2 DPI image and we made that twice the size, those blue squares would be twice the size, whereas if it was 5 DPI, obviously the pixels don't go as big as you expand it. As I said, there are some tricks you could use. That black graphic there shows you using something called a Gaussian blur. This is just an effect where it blurs the edge of the pixels. So yes, your graphic will look a little bit more blurry, but it won't look as pixelated. So this can be a trick that you can use to help you with pixelated images. There's something else that's built into most graphic design packages and also into VersaWorks called interpolation. If you look at those 2 graphics there, they are the same graphic. However, interpolation has been applied to one of them. And what it basically does is add pixels across pixel boundaries. So it softens the image. As you can see, it's not a better quality image. It just looks softer where you don't see those harsh pixel edges. So you can add interpolation to images in VersaWorks or in your design software to soften them a bit as well. In terms of resolution, it's hard to give a specific resolution that you need for graphics because it all depends on a few different factors. So first one would be viewing distance. So if you're going to be printing a very large graphic that's going onto a wall, but it's going to be at the back of an office and everybody who views it is always going to be viewing it from a few meters distance, then you can get away with a slightly lower resolution because the human eye will not be able to see those pixels from that distance. So there's viewing distance, the viewing conditions, and the type of image as well. You know, if it's a very soft, fuzzy image and it doesn't have lots of detail within it, then you can get away with a lower resolution. If the person viewing the graphic is only ever viewing it from a distance, then you can get away with more as well. However, as a rough guide, you know, some people would say that at A2 size, then your resolution needs to be between 75 and 150 dpi. Normally, when people talk about print, they would say 300 dpi as a minimum resolution, but that's more for sort of handheld graphics that are going to be viewed close up. So if you're going to be viewing a graphic from further away, a rough rule I would say would be around 150 dpi. Anything over 300 won't make any difference. So you're just going to be creating much larger files. If you don't mind having much larger files and you can handle those with your RIP and the computer spec that you have, then that's fine. But you normally don't want to be working with sort of 15, 20 gigabyte sized files, which you can be if you're working with, you know, meters sized graphics. So about 150 dpi is normally okay. So that depends on the original size of the image. When you expand it, what will the resolution be? Another way of doing this is just, it's easy to do a test. So always take a small expand your image and take a small portion, and you could print that either on your wide format device or just on a desktop printer, stick it into the location, stand at the viewing angle and decide whether you think that's good enough or not. Often this might mean that you need to either go back to the original source to re-export graphics at a higher resolution, or perhaps take that image again if that is an option. This comes down to talking to your customers about graphic resolutions. Often people will come to you with a photo that's, you know, A4 size and they want that the size of a wall, and that's probably not going to be possible unless you vectorize the graphic first, in which case it's going to look slightly different. So this just comes down to talking to your customers about and their expectations of what the graphic will look like. But the best way to do this probably is to do a small portion as a test and then check what that's going to look like on the wall. There are many sites where you can download very high resolution images for large prints. So, you know, there's lots of image stock sites. So Adobe Stock, Getty Images, Fotolia, whatever. There's loads of these different sites where you can download images, and you can get a subscription. If you tend to do this work a lot, then you can get, you know, however many images per month, which you can download and build up a library of those different images. There are some softwares as well that can increase the resolution of images. So you can get those as add-ons to other programs or as an individual program themselves, which will have an algorithm where they, you know, check the boundaries of different parts of pixels and things and add in extra ones. So they may be useful as well. Next, surfaces and locations. So normally you want to be applying onto flat, smooth surfaces. However, there are all sorts of other surfaces that you can apply to. As we mentioned earlier, brick surfaces, textured walls, whatever it is that people have for flat surfaces for their walls, or maybe they're not flat, maybe they have contours and things on them as well. There are some application fluids and things like that that you can use if you are going to be going on to trickier materials, or if you're not very comfortable with applying large graphics. By and large, if possible, you want to apply your graphics without any sort of liquid behind them, because the liquid will reduce the adhesive strength when you initially put it on. So there are solutions for cleaning surfaces as well. So cleaning is a huge part of applying graphics. Walls will be dirty, no doubt, especially if they're in high traffic areas. So you will need to clean the walls down as much as possible. If they have lots of imperfections in the wall, you may want to give them a light sand as well. Again, if you're going to light sand the wall, then you're going to need to get the sanding dust off afterwards with a damp cloth and then wait for that to dry before applying your graphics. These may seem like sort of quite advanced steps to go through, but it is going to make your graphic work and last better. So it is worth taking the time to make sure that your surface is as clean as possible. There are many different types of paint as well. So a rough rule would be that you don't want to put a graphic onto a freshly painted wall. Often when people are putting graphics up into their offices or home environments, this might be after a fresh redecor of their office maybe, so they might have just painted the walls. Now, a lot of newer paints have easy clean chemicals or technology within them, which means that once you've painted a wall, they're easy to wipe down. However, it means that the adhesives of your vinyls and things like that may not stick as well to those paints. So if you know that a customer is going to be painting the wall before you're going to be applying graphics, just get them to check the paint that they're going to be using, and you want one that's not got one of these easy clean sort of technologies built in, as it's more likely to push away the adhesive of your material. You can key the wall as well, like we said, with a light sand, and you can also test, which is probably the best way to go about this. If you've got a portion of your materials, maybe send that to the customer or apply that, a week or so before you're going to be applying your graphic, and check whether it's going to peel off from the wall. You would want paints to probably cure or fully dry. It depends on the different type of paint, but probably around 30 days before applying your graphic. It does depend on the type of paint, but the only way to really know is to do a test. So just make sure that when you're talking to your customers about this, that you again manage their expectations on the adhesive type of your material. Now, different materials do have different adhesive strengths and will stick to more so or less so, depending on whether they're repositionable or permanent or semi-permanent adhesives on your materials as well. So again, always check the data sheet that comes with your materials from the supplier and see what they recommend. However, most surfaces you can get a material to stick to. You might just either need to clean, prep, or use a slightly different adhesive material. Another thing to be aware of is high energy and low energy surfaces. So low energy surfaces, again, will repel adhesives. So you want to just check what is the wall made, or what is the surface of the wall or material that you're going to be sticking onto. It might be that it's not a painted wall, that it's a wood interior wall, or maybe a plastic partition or something like that you're going to be sticking onto. So things like HDPE are low surface energy materials, so they will require a different adhesive from your materials. Here's just a few examples of different materials again. So that graphic there is a laminate finish onto a curved wall, just to show that you can print, apply onto curved surfaces and things as well. Exterior wraps, so full building wraps you can do as well. Obviously, this is going to use a lot more material, and you're probably going to want a wider format device, but you can print onto materials that will go exterior and onto exterior films and facades as well. Other locations, things like hospitals. So I mentioned earlier about the EJ Deco, which has a different type of ink, which conforms to a lot more of the standards that they may have within hospitals and things. Some of the other materials or inks may do as well, but it's always worth checking depending on where it's going within a hospital. There are some films that you can get now as well called microbial or antimicrobial films, which mean that they do not encourage the growth of microbes, so molds or residues or whatever it is that they don't want to have within clean environments. So you can get antimicrobial films for going in places such as hospitals and things. Again, the home decor market, That graphic's actually quite an interesting graphic, as you can see, because it's got a lot of relief in the sort of 3D effect graphic, which could replace a wallpaper in a home market. Boardrooms and office environments, can often be sort of quite bland, enclosed spaces. So a great opportunity for full office kit outs to really to emphasize the brand messaging for different companies. And schools as well. Schools are a great interactive place for people to learn, so you can have messaging on the walls, especially in sort of younger children environments. Next, when we talk about materials, we've touched on a few of these, but there are so many different types out there. Some of the materials will be split by the type of adhesive that they have, rather than the type of face film or vinyl or surface film that they have. So when you talk about permanent wall graphics or removable wall graphics, these may be the exact same face film, but they will have a different adhesive. Permanent adhesives can be misleading because that doesn't mean that they're going to last forever. It just means that they are not repositionable or removable. Removable wall graphics can also sound misleading because they are normally removable up to a certain period of time. They are never permanently removable. Adhesives will become permanent over time and will become stronger over time. So just be sure again to check with your media suppliers as to the type of adhesive and what they say is the removability period. So removable wall graphics, again, it will also depend on the type of surface that you're going onto. If somebody's used a very weak or flaky paint on top of another paint, it could be that when you come to peel off that graphic, it may take off the paint as well. So just check with your customers and just maybe, again, manage expectations by saying it does depend on the type of wall that they have. Low tack wall graphics, great for sort of shop environments and things where they're going to be repositioning or reapplying these graphics with, seasonal promotions and things like that. So low tack graphics are also really easy to apply. Some of these different graphics may have air release adhesives, which basically means the adhesive is not a full solid coat, but it has small channels in it. So when you come to squeegeeing those onto the wall, the air bubbles that you may get when you're applying large graphics will have channels that they can move along, so you don't get creases when you try and squeeze them out. There's textured films that we can look at, things like linen feel or canvas feel vinyls. So they have that nice textured look of wallpapers, however, they are still printable, normal graphic self-adhesive films. Rough surface wall graphics, so like we said, ones that go onto brickwork and things like that. Textile wall graphics, these will tend not to move as much as PVC vinyls and things because they're made up of a fabric essentially that's been coated. So the fabric will tend not to move as much. Again, you've also got things like magnetic walls. So you can either have a magnetic vinyl that you would put up and then another magnetic vinyl that would stick onto that. So you would have a two-part solution basically. Or you can get full ferrous paints and things that you can paint walls in, and then the magnetic material will be able to stick to that. So there's different solutions for the magnetic capabilities of wall graphics as well. And then there's things like dry wipe materials for boardrooms where they want to be able to scribble down ideas and things like that as well. So, or anti-graffiti laminates as well. If you're going up in a school, an anti-graffiti laminate might be a good idea so that people don't draw all over the graphics, or if they do, they can be rubbed off afterwards. You can also get blackboard films, again, another useful one for restaurants or schools. Traditional wallpapers, and wallpapers will come in pre-pasted or pasteable solutions normally. If it's pre-pasted, you just wet the back of the film and then put it up and it will stick. You can also get self-adhesive. So they already have an adhesive on the back, pre-pasted or pastable like your traditional wallpapers as well. Vinyl for wrapping furniture and doors and things. So we're talking about walls and surfaces here, but maybe it's large interior cupboards and things like that that you might be wrapping as well. So you can normally just use a sort of standard vinyl for those, and which would obviously come in the different adhesive types and the different face film types as well. And again, just a few more pictures there of some of the different solutions. So those textured wall films, which are great for that interior decor look, rather than having a glossy vinyl, which might, I don't know, maybe detract from, or attract too much light, or maybe look a bit too shiny, or maybe need a bit too much cleaning. You can use those textured films, which would mimic normal wallpaper films as well. And then those, those types of vinyls where you need to use a heat gun to go into the recesses and things. In terms of application, we've mentioned application tape. Those are for graphics that have got lots of different elements cut out and things. And when it comes to the ones that need to go into contours and recesses, you need to have a roller or some kind of squeegee to get into those recesses. So you would use a heat gun to soften the vinyl to be able to go into those recesses. And one of the most common tools is that tool that you can see on the screen there, which is called a 3M TSA, which gives you the ability to hold those handles and really put some force onto a middle roller, which is a conformable roller, so it will really push into those recesses. You can also use a stiff brush or some of the other rollers and squeegees and things that are available. The other thing to do with application, as I mentioned earlier, is using VersaWorks. So if I just open up VersaWorks for a minute, hopefully you guys can see my screen at the moment now. When you're loading large-scale graphics into VersaWorks, we can create tiles for those different drops when you're going to be effectively wallpapering a graphic onto a wall. So I'm going to show you this briefly and some of the different options that are available. Here you can see I've got a graphic, it's fairly small, and this is of a sort of skyline with some grass at the bottom. And I'm using a VG2, which has the ability to print up to 1.6 meters wide. I'm just going to, I don't actually have a roll connected to the machine, so I'm just going to enter a different roll size of 1370, so a smaller roll size, a 54-inch roll size, and then I'm just going to scale the graphic to start with. So I want my graphic to fit a wall that's 2.4 meters high. So in the height, I'm going to put 2.4 meters. And what you can see on the screen there is that it's automatically tiled my graphic into 1, 2, 3 tiles, 2 at full printable width and 1 with a little gap left over. If I now go down to the clip and tile tab, we can see those 3 tiles on the screen. And we've got some options as to what we can do with those tiles. So first of all, down the bottom here, it says overlap. Now, as I mentioned earlier, normally you would have a slight join to your tiles so that they actually go on top of each other. By default, there's no overlap applied, but we can add an overlap either in the top left corners, top left sides, or all corners. Top left means that wherever there is an overlap, either on the left-hand side, so where they join in the middle, or the top edge. So if we did have, just say, for example, a horizontal split as well, then it would have add an overlap in the horizontal side as well. What I'm just going to do is put this back to 3 tiles, and we're going to say I want top left, and then we can specify the size of the overlap. So in my example, I use 20 millimeters, but you can use whatever. It normally is down to the fitter as to what their preference is for the overlap type. You might not be able to see this on your screen, but there's a small dotted line showing where the overlap would be. And what it does is it puts 1 overlap on each of the tiles. So this tile will have 20 millimeters of this tile on the left-hand side. This tile will have 20 millimeters of this tile on the left-hand side. You can lay either end first when it comes to applying. So I could start with my left-hand tile, or I could start with my right-hand tile, because there will always be an overlap available to go either on top of or on the other tile. The preference is normally down to where it's being put up within a room. If I was putting this into a room and the entrance was on the right-hand side, this normally means that you would start on the left-hand side, so the overlap join is not visible when you walk into the room. So where the join is, if you can see my hands on the screen there, where the overlap sits on top of a tile, you won't see it as much. Where the sort of raised edge lip is, you will tend to see it a tiny bit. So when people walk into the room, or the direction of traffic within the room, you want to make sure that the overlap join faces that part of the room, if that makes sense. The other option is to put all corners, but this is not really used for internal graphics or this type of application. It's more used for sort of canvas wraps and things like that. So top left will be the option. The other options you have here is you can print the actual overlap line. And this means that you can choose the thickness of that line and the color. So in this graphic, I could say I want a 0.1 millimeter thickness line. And I could say, you know, for example, I just want it to be a really light cyan, so that you're not really going to see it in the graphic, but it does give me something to aim for when I'm putting those two tiles on top of each other. Finally, one of the other options that we have in VersaWorks is something called place alternated. So if I go back to my layout here, we can see that the tiles have moved down in the page. So if they were next to each other in the graphic, they've moved down in the graphic. If I go back to the clip and tile box and I select place alternated, what you can see is that every other tile has flipped 180 degrees. The reason you do this is so that the joins, so the two edges of the graphic that are going to join, are printed on the same side of the machine. This can just eradicate any color shifts between the two graphics. So in the previous example, the two different joins were shifted, so they were on different sides of the machine. So this means that they can get an ever such a slight color shift when you put them back up to each other, next to each other on the wall. So when you're printing your large wall graphics, you want to select the place alternated option. You can also do a whole bunch of other tiling options in here, manual tiling, changing the tile sizes and clipping the image. But as a basic introduction, that's how you would tile your graphics within VersaWorks.